In today's business world, change is the only constant, and mastering transformation is the ultimate key to success. Welcome to Shift and Thrive. I'm your host, Natalie Nathanson. Each week, we'll bring you conversations with CEOs who delve into how they successfully drove critical change in their organization. This show is sponsored by Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service B2B marketing agency. Today's guest is no stranger to Shift and Thrive. She first joined us on episode 18, where we explored how systems and documentation fuel business scalability. I was eager to invite her back because of the critical relevance of her work around some of the core dynamics facing B2B executives today. Specifically, as AI reshapes how organizations must operate, she and her firm have been at the forefront, really helping clients prepare organizations for the changing world ahead. She has over 25 years of experience in the industry and has led her business process consultancy for the last 15 years. Today, we're planning to explore areas including how she and her team are using and navigating AI internally, and how executives can lead their organizations to navigate business transformation with confidence. She is the founder and CEO of Business Success Consulting Group. Adi Klevit, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much, Natalie. It's great to be here.
I'm very much looking forward to the conversation today. And before we get into the meat of the discussion, I'd love to start with a bit of context from you, because I know your work sits at the intersection of process, leadership, and operational change, and that you've been doing this for many years and well before kind of Gen AI and the current surge of kind of automation hitting the spotlight. So can you share a little bit about how your background and the focus of your firm kind of shapes the lens that you bring to looking at kind of AI and automation and how that impacts businesses today?
Sure. It's interesting. It's the way I started my career. My first job was with an international consulting company. My education is industrial engineering. So I started my career as an industrial engineer working for an international consulting company. And we were working at a Mitsubishi plant in Oregon. And my first job was to create the flow lines. So the software engineer will come and then program the software and create the actual technology. That was the end of the 90s, beginning of 2000. So it was definitely not AI, but it was still the same concept of you need to create the map, the process mapping, and the process flow, and figure out where the bottlenecks are, figure out the input, the output, and the decision points in between. So then it can be coded and create a computer system, a technology system to implement it. And that was about almost 30 years ago. It's the same today. It's the same concept, different tools to implement, faster tools that can do much better, less necessitates the exact code. A code that you can do with no code. You can create all those solutions, but you still need to have that backbone. You still need to have that process in place, because otherwise, how are you going to know what to do? What are you going to tell the AI to do? The AI needs to be told. The AI needs to be trained, but trained on what? It needs to be trained on the process. It needs to be trained on the sequence of events. It needs to be trained on decisions. More than ever, the decision tree, the decisions have to be clearer than ever, because that is what will lead to the right decisions.
Yeah, it is interesting how it almost comes back around full circle, but as you say, in a very different, business context and technology ecosystem and all of that. And I'm aware this is, for some organizations, it's very much ingrained to how they've always operated, but then for others, it's a newer discipline, or maybe the focus on kind of processes and documenting those processes hasn't been as critical. Can you talk about, how you're seeing that with, companies that you talk to, and what are those core components that an organization should be thinking about from kind of that foundational standpoint?
Yeah, so it's the question I always ask is the end question. Like, what is this going to be used for? Like, you want to document your processes, why? And I think that to answer your question, that's what organizations, companies should ask themselves, even if they don't have the documented processes. Why do they need to document? Do they need to document for training purposes, for onboarding, for retaining knowledge, or for strictly for automation? I find that it's never only strictly for automation, because automation will increase the efficiency, will also retain the knowledge, because then you extract the knowledge and then you retain it through machines, right? I mean, the machine is doing what you will have people do, or that particular part of the organization, so you're retaining that knowledge. But it's really looking at the end result. That is the first step. Like, why am I documenting? Why am I documenting? Why am I creating processes? How am I going to use those processes? And how am I going to implement technology to make sure that those processes are being followed? So once you have those questions answered, then you can go back and figure out where you're going to start and how you're going to do it and what methodology you would use in order to document.
Mm-hmm. And can you talk a little bit about those methodologies? What are the different approaches?
Yeah, I mean, we have to keep it simple because it's really simple. You have to understand when you are documenting what is the input, what is the output, and what are the decision points in between. Then you need to obviously see what are best practices and identify those best practices, and also see what are the deviations. What are the anomalies or anomalies, or what is the 20%? What is the 80%? What is the 20%? I'll give you an example. We were working with one of our clients is a CPA, and we were creating his onboarding process. We were documenting it. We were creating the workflows. I mean, basically the work line, the flow line, the process mapping of it. And he started using AI to answer the phone. Now, he realized that there are different things that the AI is not going to be able to answer because those are more complex questions. But what it can do as a beginning, until we train it a little bit more, is to answer the path of least resistance, the path that people have straightforward questions. If the AI can answer that, and those people are actually going to get the answers and schedule an appointment without having to talk to a human, what would that solve? How much time would that solve? Okay, good. We figured that one out, and it was worthwhile to do that. So as you can see, it's a common sense methodology. We don't need to subscribe to names or complex methodologies. It's what makes sense. Like, what can we actually save time with and cost? How much would it cost us to save that time and that money? See that there is an ROI, do that, and then invest the time to create the other systems that are a little bit more complex.
Yeah, it sounds a lot similar to, when we're working with organizations on kind of the marketing and go-to-market side, knowing sometimes like it takes time to put the right like strategic foundations in place, but then there's always like quick wins and low-hanging fruit and kind of trying to find that balance. So it sounds like a similar kind of dynamic there.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Is there anything different in how kind of processes need to be documented when you are looking at it like through the lens of AI and automation, like knowing that that's at least part of your end goal?
Yeah, so it has to be simplified. It really has to be simplified because these complexities have to be simplified, so then the complexities can be built back on the simplification. So in the example I gave, we had to really simplify it. What is the actual path without any additives? Good. This is for sure can be done by AI. Those are the basic decision points. Those are the basics inputs and outputs. What else can happen? And then you start building on top of that. So I think looking at things in a very simplistic way is very important to actually be able to accomplish solving complex problems.
Mm-hmm. And what about the balance of kind of automating parts of a current workflow versus like rethinking workflows? And I'm asking this question a bit selfishly because my firm, like maybe 3-4 years ago, we had a big undertaking, maybe actually 5 years ago now, of documenting all of our processes, capturing them in the right way. We got all the initial benefits of that, and that has certainly served us well now in kind of the new kind of Gen AI and automation world. But we're now at a point of not just wanting to kind of add efficiencies to what we're currently doing in the current workflows, but like revisiting them. So can you talk a little bit about, how you work with customers around that and kind of any guidance you have there?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The optimization definitely happens throughout the documentation, right? Because you experience that. So let's say we documented the onboarding process of a new client. Okay, good. So then immediately you can see, well, this doesn't make sense anymore, and we don't have the form for it. So let's implement a form here so it's more efficient. Let's think about, especially when you're remote, what is the communication and where can we store all the data? I mean, you can definitely optimize throughout the documentation. But then you look at your entire organization, you look at all the processes and you go, okay, where am I losing money? Where is the other opportunities? Not necessarily just bleeding money, let's say, because it's inefficient, but where are opportunities that I'm not taking advantage of? Right here. Okay, good. I need those and those resources. I need, in terms of people, in terms of money, in terms of time to learn and to know more. Okay, I need, let's say, those resources. Where am I going to take those resources from? And then you look at your existing processes from that lens as an example. Where can I shave another 5 hours a week so I can all of us can take an AI course and figure out how to take it to the next level? So point being is that, again, you have to look at the end product, like what do you want? Why are you want to improve your processes right now? What are you going to gain out of it? So maybe you're going to gain more customers. Maybe you're going to be more relevant. Maybe you're doing it because you're just interested and you are an innovative kind of person and you want to have like the latest and the best technology. That's fine. But whatever it is, you have to understand the reason and then find the resources within your processes where you can free it up to get to the next level and the new process.
And when you think about like organizational readiness, would you say like every organization is ready and it just depends on how they start? Or are there certain kind of signals that you look for to assess kind of readiness?
Readiness for processes, process documentation?
For documenting processes for the benefit of then looking at how you can, let's say, AI-ify a certain component.
Yeah, I mean, they have to be mature enough in terms of they have processes that they are doing and they know, they're doing it. Now it's a point of documenting what exists and then taking it to the next level. So it's fast-growing companies lacking consistency. Now, it doesn't mean that the processes are all defined. That's what, like when we help them, but it's time to define the processes, right? I mean, you've been doing something, there is a proof of concept, it's correct, it's happening. They have their marketing, people want their product, whatever it is, they are there. Now it's time to take it to the next level and being able to serve their customers, their clients correctly. Now they need the systems in order to get there.
Mm-hmm. And are you finding, like with your clients these days, are you often kind of driving or pushing that conversation, or are they coming to you kind of wanting to kind of push further on kind of AI and automation?
Yeah, it's both. In terms of, I'm on LinkedIn, very active. I put a lot of content out there. I put podcasts out there. So people call and ask questions. But it goes both ways. But I do get a lot of, hey, we are thinking about this. I mean, I heard that I should use this AI or that AI. How can you help me? I mean, there is a lot of confusion out there for sure. So in order to maneuver or to make the best out of this, in order to actually find what the points of confusions, how we can mitigate that confusion, those conversations start happening.
Yeah. And I'm curious if there's any kind of client examples recently that come to mind of where an organization really has had kind of either big impact overall or like a notable win from kind of working through this with kind of within the current like Gen AI and bringing that to bear.
Yeah, so that CPA that I mentioned, so definitely a lot of improvement in terms of he was working, the head of the company was working with an external answering service because he didn't want to hire a receptionist full time and he wanted somebody to do the intake calls. And there were mistakes, people answered the phone, according to their mood or according to, some of them were better than others. You never knew what you were going to get. There was no consistency. Changing to AI changed a lot because the easy case, and it's easy, but it's not easy. It's basically the low-hanging fruit, and those are the ones he wanted to capture right away. He just able to capture it, but they will always get a really good experience because they weren't complicated. The AI was able to maneuver the conversation and to schedule the appointments. So he got more appointments, and he also the clients got better service. So that is an example of it looks simple once it's done, but to get there and really understand the flow lines was quite something. It was definitely several iterations of how do we go from here to here. But once that's done and the process was documented, including scripts, including scenarios, he was able to do that. Then to take it further in terms of operations, another example also in the finance, I mean, in the same arena of finances and taxes, using AI to extract information from a tax return, upload that information, so then the tax or the financial advisor or whomever role was looking at it will be able to make the decisions based on data and correct data, as opposed to spending hours and hours scrubbing and getting the data and figuring it out and put it in this spreadsheet or that spreadsheet and correlating between data. So then you can take that as well. Another thing that happened on that project is like taking the data, but then compare it to other data. And the AI and the machine is so much faster in doing that. But then the decision, it's still the advisor, but there was data to operate on. So instead of spending 5 hours, they can spend 30 minutes and really do deep thinking work and move on to the next one. So that was a great example as well.
Yeah, I like that. And with the example, the CPA firm that you gave, like saying it's simple once it's done, or it looks simple once it's done, but there's a lot of work and thinking that goes into that. I want to come back to that theme maybe a bit later because I think there's a lot of interesting things around the dynamics there. But I'd also love to shift gears a bit. And I know you're not only advising clients in these areas, you're really leading your own team through it.
Mm-hmm.
And so being kind of a fellow leader of a professional services firm, would love to delve in. And maybe starting with, how have you or are you enabling your team to adopt and experiment with AI in your work?
So I definitely encourage that. I mention it. I encourage that. I give them resources. So I am part of an AI collective. I subscribe to different groups, and I give them the resources of available courses, available training, and I encourage them to do that. I hired recently our latest hire was a VP of growth. And one of the prerequisites is that he's going to be, I mean, in this case, it's a he, but before I hired, that they're going to be very knowledgeable in AI and very much adapted to AI. And the person I got on board, he is, and he's very good at it. So we started looking at all of our systems, because that's one thing that I also tell our clients. There's so much tech stack. There is there is an app for that, and there is an app for that, and there is an AI for that. And before you know it, you have so much. So we need to really adjust the amount that we are using in terms of okay, how we can consolidate, or maybe we don't need to consolidate, but we need to make sure that we understand what we have. So we looked at our entire tech stack, and now we're going through it, and we are optimizing the use of every piece of it. So for instance, internally, we use ClickUp as our task management software, and we are optimizing it, and it's beautiful. But we are consolidating. We are basically using also integration between that, and we use Slack for communication. So we use that, like an integration of that. How do we integrate our email so it comes into ClickUp and everybody will have visibility and per client? Different projects we are working on. So there is visibility and there is accountability. And we're also 100% remote. And that allows us to be in really good communication and run our projects very efficiently. So that's an example. We are also, of course, we're using AI in marketing, and you were a guest on my podcast, and we talked about it quite extensively, but it will never replace a marketing firm. It will never replace you or your team. It will never replace the high level, but it does make things faster so long as you are continuing and being in control and understanding what the output is. So that is, but we are using AI, but we're using it intelligently. So that is another example. We are definitely looking at how to use AI with what we do in terms of the actual deliverables to the client. That definitely still needs that human touch, human hand, asking the questions, etc. But we will use that definitely, like in terms of building like Grammarly or any other software that will allow us to write better. We absolutely use that as well.
Great. I would love to hear a bit more about this VP of growth role and really like hear more about, what is in that role. And you talked about kind of the AI knowledge being critical. So can you talk about that person's skills and responsibilities, and kind of what were the areas that were important for you, specifically hiring that person now, let's say, instead of like 5 years ago or something?
Right. So probably should have hired 5 years ago. Now I realize. So to answer that, I mean, that's the only way to grow and scale is to actually have the executives under me that I need to have, the leadership team, the people that are drivers, not just me. So that's, after having a VP of operations, the VP of growth made sense because they're in charge of the marketing initiatives, the sales, the growing the organization, putting in all the workflows, etc. So that's really what that push is. But I realized that in order for us to grow correctly, we have to have all of our communication in the right, like we have to have the right communication, and the lines where the communication flows have to be all correct. So if we have ClickUp, it can be a mess. It has to be very, very organized. And that's part of putting the order in. So I already started even before that. I mean, we have policies and procedures on how to use ClickUp, how to write a task, how to do even the name convention for the task. Otherwise, it becomes too random and too chaotic, and nobody wants to use it because then you start making lists in another place, like your to-do list. So then you start communicating about it in Slack. And part of the VP of growth is really monitoring, is like where the communication goes, where does it flow, where is it stuck? What do we need to do in order to create a better system? So it's really creating also the systems internally.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like a strong mix of both kind of the operational acumen and expertise and that kind of revenue and kind of growth component.
Yeah. And definitely the person that I hired has experience in operations, but he's not dealing with the operations for the client. Like operations is client facing. It's like our production, our quality control. It's like what we produce for our clients. This is, if you will, it's like kind of like we are the client. Now it's like similar to us being a client. It's like you doing internal marketing for your own firm, right? So it's different.
Right.
It's not client facing.
Right. Of course. And then, more broadly in your organization, are there any kind of themes or trends around like who's adopting like AI faster than others? Any like by function, certain profiles? What are you seeing there?
It's I think it's pretty uniform. I mean, of course, some would be more inclined, but there is a lot of uniformity in terms of like moving forward and looking and using the tools and having those conversations. And that's another thing is really having those conversations and bringing it up to the forefront internally and making it part of what is expected will bring the adoption faster.
Mm-hmm. Are there any, guardrails or anything like that that you've put in place around, like you gave the example with a client of freeing up 5 hours a week so that the team can spend more time on kind of that innovation? Is there anything like that that you found, helpful for your organization?
Well, I found that creating the procedures and the policies and the boundaries of when we use AI and when we don't, that's helpful. I found that giving the information and the training and making it available, I found that that's very helpful. I find that having that culture and that spirit in place, that it's okay and that's what we're going to do, but also reassurance, Natalie, it's also, I found it putting in place the reassurance that, hey, so long as we are going to be ahead and we're going to know, none of your jobs are in jeopardy. And I mean it. It's like none of the jobs of the people that are working with me is in jeopardy if they learn and if they understand and if they know how to stay ahead.
Hmm. Yeah, we had similarly have been reinforcing that message over and over, because I think that like comfort level and safety, of this team needs to come first. And from that point, you can kind of take risks and innovate and explore and put new ideas out there, and all of that.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
Um, One thing I've found is, we've been successful bringing our whole kind of team kind of along through this journey, been very open to experimenting, working in new ways, and kind of standardizing and working in new ways as well. It creates almost a bigger gap for new hires coming in that have a bigger learning curve, like coming into our organization, than maybe they would have had in years past. I'm curious either like if you've
Yeah.
experienced that internally, or like with your clients, if that's something that you kind of are navigating differently, and any kind of thoughts or experiences around that.
It's a very good point, because that will, I hear it like our processes are changing. This is changing, but it's true. It's definitely changing because none of us have really the manual. I mean, we have this great tool. It's kind of like a monster. It's like this amazing tool, but there is no manual. You do this and this will happen. You do that and that will happen. It is a lot of trial and error. And you do need to have the ability to change fast and think fast. But what we're doing is every time we're changing something, we document it so we don't forget what it is, and we can actually go back and experiment and see and measure the success. I mean, was that successful? And if not, let's change it. So it doesn't have to be a long process to document it. I mean, a long activity, but it still needs to be documented so you know what you're doing, because you have to create points of stability within all this change, because otherwise you're not going to be able to refer back. There will be no point of reference.
Yeah. And are there any either like tools that you recommend, clients use for kind of that documentation, any like shorthand? So I know like ultimately they want to kind of do it the right way, but if there's a process that's still kind of in transition or experimentation, you don't want to kind of document something that might look different like a month from now. And any guidance around that?
So what I do is I just even use ChatGPT and dictate what it is. This is what I'm seeing. We've done this, this, and this, and this. And then, it's just like, you have it in writing and you just plug it in. I mean, you can do that. You can record videos. I mean, there are different ways that you can do it. The writing of it is the less, you can have tools for that, is asking the right questions. That will be my recommendation, is like, what are the questions that you're asking? Okay, so how am I doing it? What am I doing? What am I not certain about it? I want to take a look, let's say a month from now, to see if it works. How am I going to measure this process?
Yeah. Well, and I think the other benefit there is you're making it easily available to others. And so if a few people are in the same role and they see, oh, you're doing it a little bit differently than mine, and right, it helps to kind of land on kind of the optimal way, or the variances that you need to take into account.
Yeah, totally.
Hey, this is Natalie, your Shift and Thrive host. After chatting with lots of CEOs, one thing is crystal clear. Leveling up your company means having a killer go-to-market strategy. That's what my crew at Magnitude Consulting does every day. If you're trying to step up your marketing game, whether it's strategizing, accelerating your pipeline, expanding into new markets, or getting into AI and automation, let's talk. No pitch, no pressure, just good conversation. Visit shiftandthrivepodcast.com/Natalie to schedule a time. Can't wait to connect. Curious to ask, the balance of any professional services firm is right, balancing the day-to-day delivery and giving kind of the best service to clients, and kind of moving the organization forward and kind of evolving in new ways. So how are you thinking about that balance of the day-to-day delivery with some of that like bigger picture, longer term evolution?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I'm telling you, it is a tough one. That's why hiring the right people under me so I can actually unload and basically get the functions so they will deal more with the day-to-day, and buying myself. My reason of doing it is to buy myself more time in order to innovate and finding better solutions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've worked through different approaches for myself. I think one that tends to work best, but when business is busy, it doesn't always get the time, is like dedicating specific days and carving out that time, and then all the resources that I collect, have a focused time to be working through that.
Yeah, I know that's the thing, is that I can't. That's what I find for myself too. I can't collapse those hats into, oh, I have half an hour here and half an hour there. No, I have to have like this, like being in the zone to do that. And that's why I also, let's say I joined, as I told you, I joined the AI Collective as an example. So this is a group of entrepreneurs that we get together 3 times a year, and it's more of a retreat or getting away, but there is downtime. There is heads down to actually create strategy and use those tools and learn more tools, because in some ways you have to extract yourself from the environment, because otherwise I find myself that if I'm sitting in the same office, I will go into my inbox and I will start handling things and I will do things. I have to almost be in a different environment, different hat, to actually be able to accomplish that.
Yeah, it takes a lot of discipline, especially right if business is good. You're busy. There's a lot going on, but that's
and that's what you say. You go like, yeah, it's good, so I'm going to concentrate. But you can't just do. You have to always look at the future. You have to have that foresight, of what is going to happen, and then do things about that. And that is, I think, our responsibility as leaders to do that.
Yeah, yep, for sure. I'm definitely feeling that pressure. And like I always say, it's a marathon, not a sprint. But continuing to push on that, every week.
Yeah, totally.
I'm curious from the client perspective, if you're how you're talking about kind of AI in your offering, your services, the value that it brings, and kind of setting kind of clear expectations around all of that.
Yeah. So what we do is, the way that we shifted on that, I mean, we still do all of our core offerings of documentation for training and documentation for improvement, but we also now do documentation in order to create AI. So our clients can then take the blueprint, and then they can either have a new ERP system that they're implementing and we're helping with the actual workflow, or they are looking at creating agents and then they need a workflow in the process. So I think it's just we're still having the basics, the backbone for them to then implement AI. So we also partner with AI, with companies that's what they do in terms of AI consulting. So then we do what we do, and then they can stack it on top of it.
Yep, that makes sense. I think you brought this up earlier, but right where some of the work happens kind of behind the scenes, and then the final product might look simple once it's done. I know there's an area that I've been working through with my team, that much of the kind of value that we're bringing to bear with AI is what happens behind the scenes, right? So in the face, it's there's all these new efficiencies to be gained and all of that, but managing the business, there's the investments we've made in kind of R&D and the team's experimentation time, and that we're not doing that experimentation on the client's watch, right? So the training, the testing, the security and governance, and then what you see at the end is kind of the what's the tip of the iceberg, so to speak.
That's exactly right. You're right. And one thing that you said that really resonated with me, we recorded the podcast. On my podcast, you were a guest, and we were talking about AI and the misconception of businesses in terms of like, oh yeah, well, I can just do my marketing using AI. Well, why do I need you, right? I mean, the same thing with, oh, I can write my processes using AI. Why do I need you? But there are so many tools out there. So it doesn't mean that when you deliver like marketing, you're not going to use AI, because you can't say that. I mean, because things are changing so fast, and why not use tools that can help? However, there are so many tools out there, and they are not being, and that's, I think, the misconception is the tools are not going to work by themselves. I mean, you do need humans to direct the tools. It's what is the AI going to do for me, not how am I going to drive the AI, not the other way around? Because when it's the other way around, like you mentioned, then you can get the mediocre cookie cutter blog post or whatever it is, right? So the investment that we make is also the investment in learning those tools. And that is the new knowledge that as a professional service company firm, we're getting paid for. I mean, that is basically what is being exchanged here is the knowledge. It's just the knowledge has to be brought up to the next level.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's a really important point, and I keep coming back to this. And I think it really does apply across different parts of the business. That like having the right foundations in place matter more now than ever, right? And it can be very tempting to want to skip over that, right? But whether it's we're talking about here, documenting the processes, making sure you have the right like systems and tech in place to support it, having the right kind of marketing foundations and good knowledge on your, ideal client and go-to-market approach and all of that, that you look kind of across the business, and you can't really kind of reap the full benefits unless you're sure you kind of have the right foundations in place, knowing that they might change, right? But at least as a foundational anchor point.
It's exactly right. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
So Adi, I would love to talk a little bit about AI use from you, like as the CEO and leader of your company. We've talked about the organization and how you support clients. Can you talk a little bit about how you're using it yourself?
Yeah. So I use it as a strategic thought partner. So when I want to make decisions, I will have the AI interview me. So then it's a sounding board, because then I can extract the ideas from me. If I want to write a thought leadership article, I have it interview I said, you're a journalist, interview me, ask me the questions. So that helps me then. And basically, it helps me formulate my own thoughts and my ideas, because somebody else is asking me all those questions. I can even feed the questions and ask me, but then ask me other questions that I didn't think about. I like to use the AI also to looking at different viewpoints in terms of like, okay, so I wrote this article, now read it as a critical editor. What do you see? Or now look at this article and read it as a CEO that is very skeptical. What do you see? What are your questions? So it helps me look at different viewpoints that maybe I didn't think about it myself, and to broaden the scope of how I look at things.
Yeah, I think that strategic thought partner is, the biggest one for me as well. I think presumably, each of us has our own ways of doing that, and I think it's figuring out, what works for you. Like I like the devil's advocate, that right, always, what am I not thinking of, or
exactly, or where would it fail? That's right. I mean, here's my strategic plan for the next year. Where do you see it will fail? Where do you see the weaknesses? I mean, this is the strategic plan, and those are the resources I'm going to use. Where is it going to fail?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's like having,
what is not strong enough.
Yeah, like a sounding board or like business advisor that you can always just pick up the phone and, here's my idea, like help me unpack this. But because it's technology, you can pull it up at any time of day.
That's true. But you see, it's a good, I mean, I still need that. I need that, like you and I having that conversation, because no matter the AI, it's not going to replace that. It's not going to replace the human, the emotions, the creation, all of that we cherish so much. So for me, you asked me also how I use the AI, but also on top of it, I've been much more connected to others personally, in person meetings, like you hosted the wonderful dinner that I attended. I flew all the way to Boston for that, because I still have that craving for that human connection that you can't find anywhere else. It's not the relationship with the AI. It's not really a relationship. It is a machine. It can extract things. It can be, instead of me talking to myself and thinking about my ideas, you still have somebody that in a distance, and you can look at your ideas and see if it's good or not. And it can bring up, according to data that it accumulated from somewhere else, it can bring up ideas that they might not have thought of, which is great. So it's a resource. But the connections with other CEOs, with other entrepreneurs, with other leaders is very, very important. And we can't let go of that.
Yeah, I'm very glad you brought that up, because I do think it can be tempting to kind of stay in your own world, and especially depending on, busy schedules, or if you're more introverted or whatnot. But you do end up in a bit of that echo chamber, regardless of how well you can use an AI in those areas. And I think in general, like we're coming from a very digital heavy mode, right? And especially looking at COVID, and there's a lot of people, right, spending more and more time in front of screens. But in times of change and disruption, hearing from others and what's working for others and bringing new ideas in. I get so much value from that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
Curious, before we wrap up the conversation, as you think about kind of the demands on kind of SMB executives these days and the journey that you've been on, any kind of tips or advice for folks looking to kind of best harness AI for use for themselves, maybe folks that feel like they're maybe a bit behind in their adoption?
Yeah, I think it's like you have to assess and evaluate where you're at and take the next step. I'm a big believer of the next step, whatever your next step is. Do something to a win, like accumulate those small wins. So if you've never used ChatGPT, which I mean, I don't know, maybe maybe it is, maybe you are, maybe there is an aversion to it. Maybe it's fear, whatever it is, start using it. If you're using it and you feel like you're not using it enough, watch a video, figure out some prompts and start using it. It's just, it comes with using it and have the willingness to use it.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I think that's a fantastic place to wrap up our discussion. Before we do that, can you please let our listeners know where they can reach you if they want to get in touch?
Absolutely. So I'm very active on LinkedIn. So it's Adi Klevit on LinkedIn. You can always text or call at 503-662-2911. Email me, adi@bizsuccesscg.com. Plenty of ways to get a hold of me.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you, Natalie, for having me. It was a great conversation indeed.
Wonderful. And thank you too to everyone listening. I know I loved hearing so much of what Adi shared from some of the examples of how they're working with clients to bring kind of more AI optimization and benefit to their organization, how Adi uses these tools herself as a thought partner, and the importance of the human connection at the end of all of this. And so if today's episode gave you any valuable insights, and I'm sure that it did, please share this with someone. We know that sharing this kind of knowledge and information helps us all grow as leaders and helps us drive successful organizational transformation. So thank you again, Adi, and this has been another wonderful conversation on Shift and Thrive. I'll see you all next time. That's a wrap for this week's episode. For show notes and more, visit shiftandthrivepodcast.com. A special thank you to our sponsor, Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service marketing agency to help B2B companies fuel their growth. For more information on Magnitude and to get your complimentary transformation readiness assessment, visit magnitudeconsulting.com/getready. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.